Hello and welcome to a brand new video where we'll be discussing the return for training for players and what's next for what's coming ahead in terms of Premier League football. I am Diyar and today I'm joined by James and Nick, and we've got a special guest. We've got Johnny back. Welcome back, Johnny.
Hey. Hello, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been a while. How are you coping without football?
I'm coping all right. It was very, very nice having it back at the weekend in a slightly different style. And it was that moment when Dortmund celebrated and recognised the yellow wall as they always do, but there was nobody in it. Where you thought, right, this isn't quite the same thing. But no, I just about got on without it. But having it back is much, much better, definitely.
Yeah, 100%.
How do you cope with not having any investment in any of the teams, though? Because I just couldn't get into it. And what really made me laugh was them applauding around the stadium. I assume they're applauding all the people watching at home. But it was, I was in the kitchen cooking and my son was watching it on the telly. And it really sounded like Bracknell Sports Centre on a Saturday afternoon. Like a sound effects album. And it just, I don't know. It's without fans, it's not football. I don't know.
It's quite interesting because I've been hearing that you can hear the actual players shout at each other and talk and eavesdrop on what's being said on the pitch and what the managers are saying. So from a different perspective, that's quite fascinating for me, and I'm kind of looking forward to that because you get that at Sunday football when you're watching from the touchline, but you're not able to hear that normally at a Premier League match because the crowd is so noisy. So yeah, it's not going to be the same, but I'm kind of looking just forward to that little bit of it, to be honest.
And apparently at the Dortmund game, one of the Hamburg defenders said something quite rude to Erling Haaland about his mother right before Haaland went and scored. So I quite like that dynamic because you wouldn't hear it. And actually, I guess if your kids are listening, you've got to be careful. But I quite like hearing exactly how rude they are to each other.
One of my favourite Ray Wilkins moments was an England international was being shown live, which was unusual in the 80s. And the commentator was going, Ray Wilkins is such a good ambassador for the game, somebody for kids to look up to. The ball went out of play, literally, as the commentator said that. And you heard Ray Wilkins go, "Oi, kiss that fucking ball." And he was one of my favourite players from then on because he was just, they're different on the pitch than they are off it.
Yes. So talking about now we've talked about empty stadiums. Let's just get into that then. So relating it back to Palace, I mean, Johnny, as a neutral, looking at it, away players keep on saying going to Selhurst Park is one of the hardest grounds in the Premier League. How do you think this will impact Palace and teams coming to Palace when football does resume once again? Do you think that Palace will lose that? Of course, the home advantage won't be there fully, but how much do you think it will impact Palace?
I think Palace will be at more of a disadvantage than pretty much every other team in the Premier League. And that's not to say that suddenly it's going to be a disaster and you're massively, massively disadvantaged, because it's going to be fine margins. But there is a reason why you guys and Selhurst Park have that reputation. The support is very, very good. It's very vocal. And surely it's got to be easier for an away side if it is, as James was saying, silent. You can hear the players, but you haven't got all those Palace fans doing what Palace fans do best.
So would you be more confident, let's say, of your team coming to Palace than of getting a result without the fans?
Well, being an Arsenal fan, it's normally quite easy because any goal that goes in, onside or offside, they just give it for us, which does seem to help whenever we play you. But yeah, I would be. Absolutely. You lose that element of intimidation and of distraction, and you let those big teams think about like a Mesut Ozil, right? Those technical players who basically don't like it when you get in their face. You're taking away a huge amount of all the stuff that stops those guys operating. When you turn it into a training match, I think it's going to be much more about who the best 11 players are, and that might not always favour Palace, if we're being honest.
Yeah, Johnny, more of a team effort rather than individuals. I think I kind of agree because I think for a very special player who's individually really talented, I think a lot of the their game improves because of the crowd, and they're kind of playing to the crowd. Well, they won't be able to do that now. So there's no point in them really sort of raising their game for expectations that the crowd is going to really sort of, you know, push them on and encourage them to you know, with their trickery and go forward as much as they may be, you know, when there is a 50,000 crowd behind them. So yeah, I see your point on that, and I think we could, as a team, we if we just keep our heads down and concentrate and do the job like Roy Hodgson always wants us to do, we could end up, you know, getting a few interesting results.
It's got to be hard for the players though, because playing in empty stadiums, obviously they've got to kind of live in a bubble where they're staying away from anywhere where they could possibly pick up COVID. I know some players, Troy Deeney, I've actually got a bit of respect for him for actually coming out and saying, I don't care if I don't get paid. I don't feel safe enough to put my daughter at risk. And I read somewhere, is it something like to hold a game behind closed doors on telly, you still need 275 people.
Really? Yeah. You still need a lot of stuff. I mean, we saw in the Bundesliga this weekend. I think they restricted the reporters to 10 and also photographers to 3. But there's so many people behind the scenes that you still need at football ground, apart from the players, to make sure the game runs smoothly as possible. And we saw ball boys, you know, there and other people to consider as well. Lots of people, and I don't think it's as easy as just saying 11v11, let's go behind closed doors. As you said, there's lots of people involved. And talking about a player, one of our own, Patrick Van Aanholt, he tweeted it over the weekend whilst watching the Bundesliga games. And he said, no matter what they decide, without the fans, it's not the same. You're the heart, the soul, and the passion, and we don't exist without you. And I feel like that pretty much summarizes it. For some players like Van Aanholt, I mean, other players will feel this way. The fans mean a lot because as we've all played football at some points of our life, of course, not with fans in the Premier League, but having that encouragement behind you and the fans, that actually does kick on footballers. And we've seen it with Wilfried Zaha. He said how his chants affect him so much in terms of boost. So I think it will come down to individual players and how they take it. Some players would want the fans, but some players will just have to carry on with their jobs and it'll be a normal game for them. And I think that's pretty much it in terms of playing behind closed doors. It's not going to be good for both of us. But what can we do? We need football one way back or another, and we'll just have to take it, I guess.
But I think Nick makes a really good point about everything having to be behind closed doors, because to play the games, for the players, it isn't just a match. They've got to be basically in quarantine in a hotel. And the Troy Deeney example is a specific one because his kid has had breathing problems and all the rest of it. But even on a more basic level, if you're a player who doesn't have underlying health conditions and your family are fine and all of that, so that's not a worry, you're still being asked to go and live in a really weird dystopian bubble for 3 months. And I don't see why you'd do it. If someone said to you, you got to go to work, but you can't see your family for 2 months and you've got to go and live in a weird hotel room, I'd go, no, sorry. I don't see what's in it for those players.
It's no different to the conversation I'm having with fellow teachers about, you know, do we go back? How do we know what's safe? Do we know enough about it to actually make that decision? And it's with football, it's a money thing. We interviewed Steve Parish when we first got promoted back in the days when we were Holmesdale Radio. And he said, to be honest, we don't need the money from the fans. We can get by without it. Okay, going down to the Championship and lower leagues, they do need the revenue from spectators, but it's not needed in the Premier League. And it just makes you wonder how much of it is down to money to actually get it back on, how much of it is to appease the population, because football is soma. If you've read Brave New World, you know what that means. Placates the masses and gets them talking about other things other than the important stuff. And gambling companies. And I think deep down, the cynical me says that's what it's all about. That said, I can't wait to see Palace play again. But if it's sterile, is it football without the spectators?
You get what you're saying, Nick, but I think it's a workaround, and I think everyone in every profession has to come up with a workaround. Otherwise, no one is going to go anywhere or do anything until a vaccine is out, and it's just going to take possibly 12 months or longer. And, you know, different professions, different businesses are going to have to adapt, because this is the way of our life for the next 12 to 18 months. But yeah, there will be the odd individual person that won't feel comfortable, such as a teacher, a football player, or whoever. And you have to respect that. And they might be shielding somebody. One interesting thing, we were talking about Troy Deeney, but what they're questioning now in the media is that apparently, he's quoted as saying that he was absolutely happy and above board to go back to training. But he didn't turn up for training today. So I don't get that. And he's getting a lot of criticism for that because, the training is safe. Everyone's distancing. There's no contact. There's no staying away from families. But he's refused to go to training, whereas before he had pre-agreed that he would go to this kind of level 1, which is the training. So I don't know if you've got any more news on that, Johnny, that you've heard.
No, I don't know what the latest is at Watford. I think it's really interesting, though, in terms of what we are expected to do and whether you should go to work because all your colleagues are going to work or whether everyone gets to do their own thing. I'm not going to work at the moment, but back when I was still working every day, we were being told that we had to go into the office long after I didn't feel comfortable going into the office. And when I said I'm not coming into the office, it didn't go down very well. And I can see why it wouldn't. But actually, I think in a context like this, if Troy Deeney doesn't feel comfortable going to training, my personal view is he shouldn't have to go to training. And if a teacher doesn't want to go and teach, I don't think the teacher should have to go and teach because it is all very, very scary and I think quite oddly personal as well.
Yeah, 100% agree. So what happens with them players? Do they get wage cuts? Is it normal? It's a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to decide, isn't it? In terms of what do? Do you give them full pay, Nick?
Well, I happened to see Simon Jordan on last night, which would be, what are we on today? Tuesday. It would have been Monday night's news night on the 18th. It's from about 32 minutes in. And he was adamant that if a player didn't play, that you shouldn't really pay them because they're not, they're in a bubble. They're different to everybody else because they're famous footballers. That was kind of the gist I got from it. It's hard when they're on such big money to be paying them to be sitting around. I'm not saying they're not doing anything because they'll have their own training and whatever, but it's a lot of money for not doing anything. So I kind of see it from that perspective. And yeah, but the TV monies want their income. The TV companies want the money they've paid, and the Premier League can't afford to not fulfill that obligation. So I think that's also pushing it as well.
I don't think it's down to just the TV money because the players themselves have come out and said we want to get back and play. There's been reports of players, saying we're suffering mentally here because we're stuck at home and we're itching to get back. We don't know what to do with ourselves. So I think the majority of people want to get back to normal life and the majority want to play. I don't think it's a question of players trying to avoid playing. But there will, as you say, be the odd 1 or 2 people that don't want to do it. And I think, we have to respect the wishes of those people. But maybe, as Simon Jordan said, the clubs can't afford to pay the wages and you give people the option. Say, well, look, the rule is that, we have restrictions and safety in place for you to come back to the workplace as a footballer in this instance. But if you choose not to, we're happy to do that. But you have to take a sabbatical. You're not going to get paid, but you take a sabbatical and you come back when you feel the time is right. Whenever that time is, whether it be when there's a vaccine out or whether they feel that in this case their baby is growing up a bit more. I think it is a personal choice and it's not one you can force people in. But the wages are so high, I can't see how the football clubs really can survive or pay somebody 50 grand a week and then force somebody else to come and play when they don't want to. So yeah,
but you're spot on because then you're not making Deeney play and you're just not paying him for it, and he can afford not to be paid and he holds his hands up and go, that's fine. I think that is the model. I think that basically solves it. It's between the club and the player. If the player doesn't want to play, you don't pay him. Fine. I genuinely don't see a problem with that.
Yeah, but who'd be liable if a player caught COVID at work?
There is that. I remember when the first reports came in regarding the return of the Premier League, the doctors, in fact, said, well, are we going to be liable for what happens? I mean, they weren't really too sure what was going on. Is it the Premier League? Is it the club doctors? That's another big issue. Like, it does get sidetracked at times. We don't really think about it. But if someone catches coronavirus and, God forbid, something really bad happens to one of their family members or them, who comes in charge? I mean, is it the Premier League's responsibilities or is it the club doctor's responsibilities? Because imagine if you're a club doctor at Palace, you don't want to take that burden on yourself. You don't want someone who's at risk coming to work and have the risk of spreading to others. So
imagine you're a teacher with kids, mate. Imagine you're a teacher with kids coming in. That's what we've been trying to get across. The other thing about the COVID, because we don't know the answers. And I know you spoke with James on the last show, Diyar, about possible moves for Zaha from Newcastle. And I wanted to raise this while Johnny was on. I think we might see the transfer market crash a little bit. Hear me out.
Yeah.
When Crystal Palace were in administration, we had to sell Klein and we had to sell Moses in order to survive. Now, I don't think it's going to be so much in the Premier League. I'm not sure because I don't know how close to the edge clubs are with their balance sheets. But if they are losing lots of money, is it going to be a time to get a bargain simply because clubs are going to be desperate to unload? And on the opposite side, does it mean that if we do want to get rid of Wilf or Wilf wants to go, that we're going to have to get a much lower price for him because the market's dropped?
My instinct in answering that question is that it's bad news for Palace, and I think what you're going to see is you won't see proper bargain basement sales, because at the top level, this isn't going to be for most clubs about being close to the red, right? They're not going to be close to ceasing to exist, but it's going to be about being more economically responsible. So I think we will see a massive decrease in the amount of mega transfers that happen. The idea of spending 80 million quid on a player will go back to being really, really rare. We've already seen deals like Jadon Sancho to whichever English club it was going to be. Basically, people saying no one is going to spend that kind of money because they don't know where their next meal is coming from. So I think if you were to sell Zaha in the next 12 months, I would be very surprised if you got more than 50 million for him when you would have got, 85 from Everton 6 months ago.
Yeah, we talked about yesterday. It was if you haven't watched the video, you can go back and watch it. But Zaha was linked with a Newcastle move for around £60 million if their takeover happened, which I'm not too sure what's going on with that due to the current coronavirus mess. But yeah, it is a hard one. I don't really see it. I think it depends on when the transfer market opens and everything is clarified, because we don't even know what's happening with the transfer market now. Is it open? Can we approach players? What's happening with players whose, their contracts ends in June? I mean, FIFA did allow extensions to happen, but there's so much uncertainty. So it's a bit of a hard one to see what exactly is going to happen in the market when you don't even know when the market is going to open up, really. So I haven't really given that much thought in terms of the prices of footballers. But just finally, let's talk about actual Palace players. They returned to training today. The step one of the return to training protocol enables the squads to return while maintaining social distancing. Contact training is not yet permitted. And also, another note, the club has acquired the use of Kent Cricket Ground, which is opposite of Palace's training ground, as the car park is considerably larger, affording the players and staff to afford a safe passage onto the club's pitches. So, guys, I'll start with you, James. When you look at the amount of focus that's being put into the training ground, for example, the fact that the car parks you have to use a different car parks just for safe passage, it must be encouraging to see, both as a fan and as a player, that your welfare is being taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, I live just, 10 minutes down the road from Copers Coat Road, which is where the training ground is. And quite rightly, there is a big, Kent have got one of their smaller county grounds there. So there is a lot of land there because it used to be all owned by the banks, the sports grounds. And I remember playing there myself for legal and general, and they're lovely grounds, and they're even better now that the professional club Crystal Palace, obviously, we've taken over. But it's very spacious. It's in the residential area. It's nice and quiet for the players. There's really nothing around. They should be able to isolate quite well. I imagine that they must be really pleased at the majority of them getting back, rather than being stuck in the house. I mean, I certainly would be if I was fit enough to go. I wonder, I think the interesting thing is I think they can't eat at the ground, and I don't think they can take showers there as well. I think they have to come home and have the shower at home. That's what I've heard.
I thought didn't they stop eating at the ground when they got that bad hygiene rating anyway? I wouldn't have gone near it at all. How long ago? Remember when that was all we had to worry about? Simple times, eh? Gastroenteritis going on.
They found a rat in the kitchen, didn't they?
Somebody got their UB40.
Yeah. But I mean, overall, it is, as you said, it is such a positive to see. You look at the pictures even today that the club have released. I mean, MacArthur does look very skinny. He's considerably lost weight during the coronavirus pandemic. That's the whole negative about this. But the players are smiling and they're back in the environment. And hopefully this should encourage. I mean, it's still no more contact training yet. So we're still a long way for us to get into full-on training. But hopefully in the near future, what the talks have been of the Premier League returning can actually happen.
Yeah, I mean, Andros has tweeted, he said he's really impressed with the setup, the doctors, the way that everything's been looked after, the contact between the club and the players during the lockdown, and sort of building up with risk assessments and everything for training. And James is right. There's lots of nooks and crannies and ways in and out of that Kent site. So that's good.
Well, not every...
June the 16th, isn't it the same?
Yeah. I think that's what they're suggesting, mid-June, early June. We're not too sure yet because it changes every day, depending on what report you're reading. But not every Premier League club is doing this. So let's end it with this. I'm not too sure if you know, Johnny, but what's happening with the likes of Arsenal, for example? Are they back in training?
I think the situation there is they've opened London Colney basically because such large numbers of the Arsenal squad were getting in trouble for breaking lockdown that they were like, right, come into work and we'll keep an eye on you children. We had, I think it was Xhaka and David Luiz met up in a park, and there were various other things, and Lacazette is now in trouble over a video published in a national newspaper a few days ago. They are going into training. What I've heard is that similarly they're kind of being very careful, getting all the doctors on site, doing it all in the right kind of way. But I'm still kind of skeptical because however right all of the individual clubs get this, we still had that test today where of the over 700 Premier League players, 6 of them tested positive for coronavirus across 3 clubs. It's not masses, but for me, it's enough that I kind of look at it and I go, in a month's time, really? I'm not convinced.
Yeah.
Well, at the moment, but don't forget when they actually start approaching the actual matches, they're going to be tested before they are locked away in their hotels. So I haven't got any concern at that point. And you can't stop. Everybody's got to go out to the shops, and all of us, we still have a risk of catching it if we're not careful. So I think that's the kind of society we live in at the moment. But yeah, as they get more, I'm a bit interested in what Diyar was saying. When this phase 1 is happening now, but what happens in phase 2? Maybe how do we have this kind of football training, contact football training? Because they're going to have to start getting a bit close to each other in preparation of these matches, and that's the time where maybe they could catch something off each other. You can't just say, well, we're going to lock you away for all the training, or maybe they will, I don't know. But as far as I was concerned, they were just going to be isolated for, the 7 days running up to the match, and that was it. But I'm going to be interested to see how they allow this contact football in training, in addition to being isolated 7 days before a match.
Some people,
social distancing in football anyway is bonkers. I mean, someone pointed out on Twitter after the Bundesliga games that they were doing socially distanced goal celebrations, which is all great. But then when you're in the wall from the free kick, you're shoulder to shoulder with 4 different people. And you go, well, yeah, great. Whatever happens, you're going to have to take a risk, aren't you?
Yeah.
Did you know?
Yeah.
Did they spit less? Because footballers like to spit, didn't they?
You would hope so.
Less flobbing.
I don't think...
You wouldn't want to play against Luis Suarez, would you?
No.
Not in this current climate.
From now on, I guess...
He loses.
From Opta stats, I guess we'll see spitting stats from now on. Player number 1 spitted 4 times. But also, just to end it on, it'll be interesting. What you mentioned, James, was interesting because when we move into phase 2 of training, when there's contact sports, let's see if any of the players change their mind. Some players may be comfortable coming into training now because they want to up their fitness, but we've seen it before with players not really feeling comfortable. So some players may be happy right now, but with phase 2, they might not feel as comfortable. So that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, that was a good chat with everyone, a good catch up as well. If you have enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe. And let us know what you think in the comments down below. Would you be excited for the Premier League to return? What do you think about player welfare? Let us know. And until next time, up the Palace.